Well, coming up on today's show, could officials be jailed over a lack of tackling air pollution? A positive reaction to the weekend Tesla news about staying public, and Dongfeng Nissan launched the Sylphy zero-emission EV. Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, the 28th of August edition of EV News Daily. It's Martyn Lee here with the news you need to know about electric cars and the move towards sustainable transport. Thank you to myev.com for helping make this show. They built the first marketplace for EVs, totally free. You can buy and sell and learn all along the way. Check them out at myev.com. We'll start with some news, and a German newspaper reports that judges are considering jailing senior Bavarian officials for failing to tackle action against air pollution in Munich. And of course, Munich being the home of BMW. That's according to a Bloomberg report today. Daily SZ reported on Monday that the South German state's administrative court believes that jailing officials may be the most effective way of forcing the Bavarian government to enforce emissions-cutting measures. Now, Munich topped the ranks of 65 German cities that exceeded levels of harmful particulates in the last year, and Bavarian officials have refused to impose measures in the state capital, such as limiting diesel vehicles driving in, despite heavy fines. That, I think, is what you would call accountability. If you're an official and it's your job to look after everything from public health to public economics, if you put private business over people, be aware that if you get it wrong and you end up polluting hundreds of thousands of people, you could well go to jail. I would love to see the outcome of that advice which is being sought. It would certainly sober a few of those discussions when it's like, well, can we do this? Is this the right thing for our biggest manufacturer, BMW? If the alternative is lots of people's public health suffers, and I could end up going to jail. Oh, no. I think we'll do what's right for public health, actually. Yeah. Now, very good idea, everyone. Very good idea. Well done. Pat on the back. Well, analysts at Baird, moving on to the Tesla news today, analysts at Baird said the U-turn they took over the weekend of not taking the company private and staying public was good news in the long run. At the time of recording the podcast, last time I looked, Tesla shares were down around 1.5% as people took stock of the U-turn. Baird analysts said that we are buyers on weakness as we expect shares to move higher at the end of Q3 deliveries and results. Tesla's averaged nearly 1,500 VIN registrations a day so far in August. That's an imperfect but a directional way to track production. We believe progress on the Model 3 production ramp could be a significant positive catalyst for the stock, they added, according to this report. One of the most intriguing stories today was that Elon Musk decided to, in the end, keep Tesla public when he learned that Volkswagen had emerged as a front runner to invest in a new private Tesla. Well, Inside EV said that an article in the Wall Street Journal claims that Volkswagen were amongst those interested in a piece of private Tesla, though no mention was made regarding the size of the stake, by the way. There was a good chance that it was big enough to give it some amount of voice, if you like, leverage in the affairs of Tesla going forward. Well, according to this report, Musk was deeply suspicious of rival car companies, believing they would want to piggyback on what he calls the Tesla halo, and therefore, come that blog post, decided to stay public all along. Some would say, better the devil you know. Meanwhile, Electrek have an article today about production numbers, and this is interesting. Electrek are not only always, I tend to find when history shakes itself out, and you look back at those articles written over the years, and I know lots of people have an opinion on how close they are to Tesla. I don't really have an opinion, by the way. I'm thousands of miles away over the Atlantic from all of the goings-on in California and Fremont and Canada and Electrek. But when you look back at those articles, many of them have been pretty much hitting the nail on the head. So they've got a good track record. And some say they're close. Almost too close to Tesla, and that if Tesla wanted to get some news out, they sometimes use news outlets to get that news out there, like all companies would. There's nothing wrong with doing that. So a new article that says Model 3 numbers the production numbers might not quite be up there is interesting and we should pay attention to it. Firstly, Electric say a source that has told them 47,000 vehicles in total, not just Model 3s, have been produced in Q3 so far, puts them on target for 70,000 by the end of the quarter. That's at the end of September. Well, last quarter, they were hitting new records of 53,000. So to get to 70,000 is another huge increase. As an aside, by the way, they do say Model 3 numbers not quite hitting exactly 5,000 a week, just starting to get that news out there, so it wouldn't be a shock if they have to release that news at the end of the quarter. Also, Fred Lambert saying that he's seen the weekly production numbers, and in relation to the Bloomberg tracker, which I use quite a lot, which I know lots of other people take a look at to see how the Model 3 production's coming along. The Bloomberg tracker, he says, he pretty much discredits its accuracy based on the numbers that he is referring to. That's kind of super interesting. I'll put a link to all those articles in the show notes, by the way. Moving on to Nissan and China, and Dongfeng Nissan have begun production of the Sylphy. Well, the Nissan Sylphy Zero Emission is the first Nissan electric car made purely for China, and it's begun rolling off the production line. They are finally out there in the public. The start of production by Dongfeng Nissan, Nissan's joint venture with Dongfeng Motors, coincides with another milestone, actually. The companies have built 10 million vehicles in China since they started operations. Well, the model, the Sylphy, is developed based on the platform of the world's best-selling EV, of course, the Nissan Leaf, and the best-selling Nissan sedan in China, actually, the Sylphy. It's being built at Dongfeng Nissan's Haodu plant, and it is, from the front, it's the new Nissan Leaf. From the side, it's the new Nissan Leaf until you get to the back, and then there's a sticky outy booty bit. And then from the rear view, it looks nothing like you've seen elsewhere. But for 3/4 of the car, it's basically the new 40 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf, or the Leaf 2, or the Leaf 3, depending on how you calculate these things. It's a nice looking car, about $24,000 US dollars equivalent. Not that you can buy one unless you go to China. Well, there's all sorts of bits related to EVs. Who makes the motors? Who makes the batteries? Who makes the inverters? Who makes the drivetrains? Who makes the tyres they run on? Hankook are one of those tyre manufacturers. Earlier today, Hankook Tyres unveiled its second generation tyres designed purely for EVs. Now, the South Korean company said it'll start sales of what they've called the Kinergy ASEV tyre. It uses low rolling resistance rubber made for EVs, starting production in September, and the tyres produce less drag than conventional treads. Very, very important for range and fuel economy. The new tyres also make minimal road noise. Also important because if you've been in an EV, you'll know, well, there is no noise. It's one of the nicest things about the first, apart from when you get over the instant torque and that 0 to 60 time of, holy moly, that was quick. The second thing is, we can just have a conversation at normal conversation levels. So brand new tyres that reduce that cabin noise as well. The company added it applied an aramid hybrid material. I've no idea what that is. For durability, claiming the new tyres reduce wear to the treads. The latest product makes use of various compounds like vegetable oil and helps drivers maintain control of the vehicle in adverse weather conditions. Safety's top of the list, as always. Very well suited to applying maximum brakes, Hankook said. I'll put a link to that press release in the show notes if you want to find out more. Well, electric trucks are coming. Like it or not, electric trucks are on their way, and they're coming quickly. More and more studies show that they're not only feasible to build, but really profitable to operate, according to Euractiv. In the last 12 months alone, not only Daimler, I get in trouble however I say it, but nearly all major European truck makers like Volvo, Renault, and MAN and DAF have announced production and sales of electric trucks in the coming years. Battery prices are falling faster than ever before. Electric drivetrains are much more efficient than the outdated diesel technology. And 65% of trips by trucks in Europe are less than 500 kilometres. That means there's no need to have the same range as long-haul diesel trucks for most journeys. Now, trucks account for 22% of vehicle emissions, but they make up less than 5% of vehicles on the road. If we are prioritising things, you'd have to say prioritising trucking should be at the very top of the list before the cars that you and I put in our driveways and outside our houses. If you're interested, by the way, in this kind of topic, there was an interview that I did a little while ago with Teva. They are Tevva. Teva. They make range extended trucks, and it's a fascinating concept. They don't think that the answer is in pure EV trucks. They're being made right here in the UK, and I did a podcast special with them a few weeks ago now. If you go to the podcast website, by the way, which is evnewsdaily.com, I've added a little search magnifying glass to the top right of evnewsdaily.com. If you type in Teva up there, Tevva, you'll see a podcast from back on the 23rd of June, and I was talking to them about one of the Saturday specials we do, talking to them about their concept, about what they do, about range extended trucks, how you can use the battery like 90%, 95% of the time use the battery, and when you do need the range extender to kick in, doesn't drive the wheels like a lot of these range extenders, it simply acts as a generator. You've got that, or fleet operators, because I don't think you would have one of these, but fleet operators would have the backup, the reassurance, the knowledge of knowing that actually if I need to, if we've misplanned the route or something, we've got the power to get back and we don't need to worry about it. So check out that if you're interested in trucking, one of our previous interviews that we've done. Well, Vauxhall aren't exactly at the front of the queue. Opel, of course, another name for Vauxhall, could have a wonderful car. If Opel wanted to sell the Chevrolet Bolt here in the UK, they could do. Politics have somewhat got in the way of that. And I should talk about the Bolt more, by the way. We talk about the Model 3 all the time. However, the Bolt has great range and great performance, great styling. And if they would sell it here in Europe as the Opel Ampera E, which kind of happens but doesn't really. Is it even still being sold? There was so much anti-selling going on, and orders were placed and then orders couldn't be fulfilled. Here in the UK, we can't get one for love nor money. They won't sell one here. However, one day, if Vauxhall is still going as a car company, if Opel is still going, then hopefully they're selling electric cars. They've got obviously a big parent company behind them. And here in the UK, the Ellesmere Port Car Factory could become the production centre of Vauxhall's electric cars, saving about 1,000 jobs there and creating more. Well, the Peugeot and Citroën giant Group PSA is set to announce a step up in their electrification plans just before the Paris Motor Show. That's in a few weeks' time. That's in October. Is it end of September, Paris Motor Show? So this is according to Robert Lee, no relation to me, writing in the Times. PSA is planning a range of Vauxhalls to be built on the same assembly technology as Peugeot and Citroën models. However, I don't want to go into Brexit on this podcast because you hear it everywhere here in the UK. All of that investment does hinge on the relationship that here in the UK we have with Europe post-Brexit. And if it's something that can't be worked out, they just won't do it, because economics wins every time. They won't do it out of charity if it's more expensive. But like I say, let's not get into the politics of that. I know that the manufacturing of cars, particularly because of the thousands of bits that goes into a car, that if you assemble a car here, there's many cars are assembled here in the UK, but the bits come from all over Europe. And at the minute, if you look at industry bodies like the SMMT here in the UK, they are saying that the biggest concern is that those supply chains, those supply lines, all the what's known as just in time, so bits aren't sitting around in factories for weeks. At the minute, you can do that because of ease of movement. If the politicians mess up Brexit, and it's too hard to get thousands of bits into the country, there's a chance those cars will be made elsewhere. But I don't want to go into that because it gets very political and at the minute a heated topic here in the UK. But that car manufacture is just a handful of things, but it's one of the things that you do need to get lots of bits from lots of countries at just the right time, and being held up at borders and things, it just ain't going to work. Well, the final two stories are kind of one story, but kind of two stories. How do you fancy going electric camping. Well, two stories that I saw today. Firstly, a trailer, or what we would call a caravan. I don't know if many countries around the world call them caravans. We would call them caravans. The things that you tow, the trailers that you tow that you can sleep in overnight. What has an 80 kilowatt hour battery capacity, comes with two electric motors that are 40 kilowatts each? Well, the answer is a caravan, and it's made by Deleths, who are very famous for motorhomes and things like that. It's called the e-Home, and it was unveiled at the Caravan Salon at Dusseldorf. The benefits of the electric drive and storage by putting a battery into a caravan are varied, and it begins when it's being towed. Cars with a very low towing capacity can actually pull a very heavy caravan if you support it with electric power in the caravan and electric motors on the axle. The driven axle of the e-Home can minimise the required trailer load. When you get to the campsite, you have automatically marshalled movement. It's got motors on the axle, so you can move the caravan to where you want it to get to without having to grab the handle and get four of you pushing it around a campsite. It'll move on its own by electric power. And once the parking space has been reached and the e-Home is connected to the power grid, well, that power is supplied completely via electricity. At least in the solar half year, that should be okay, even with heating, and on the kind of humidity side of things, the air conditioning and cooking you can do without having to carry gas bottles around. After the trip, maybe when the car is back in the garage or your driveway or the carport, and it's attached to your house, of course, then it becomes a giant battery storage for your house. Storing electricity when it's cheap. Maybe you've got some PV on the roof, or you store it overnight on Economy 7 when you can get that cheap kilowatt hour rate, and you store it in your caravan battery and you use it all day. And then when you go camping, you take your battery with you. This is a stunning bit of innovative thinking. Also at Dusseldorf, the Mercedes van there was three Mercedes camper concepts announced. One of them was fuel cell technology being promoted in the concept Sprinter F-Cell, and it uses Mercedes-Benz's new battery electric technology and fuel cell powertrain, giving it a total range of 530 kilometres for a motorhome. And the van is fitted with 3 tanks on the underbody, able to hold hydrogen in there, enough to cover the Sprinter F-Cell for 300 kilometres. A 4th tank resides in the rear to extend the range, and then the hybrid battery can take care of another 30 kilometres as well. I'll put a link to the carmag.co.za article to read all about that Mercedes-Benz camper van, if that sounds like your cup of tea. I don't think at Dusseldorf, I've tried to do a bit of research on this, because I was expecting something like the Nissan ENV200 van, which you normally see as a work van, but you can get as a kind of people carrier setup with seats in, and also as a camper van setup. I thought there'd be lots of interpretations of that, but I couldn't find any. If you know that kind of thing and you follow these kind of things, let me know. You can email the show, hello@evnewsdaily.com. Talking of emails, by the way, I did get an email that was... So it's a rumour, nothing confirmed on this, but I thought it was interesting to talk. So I want to just talk about Kevin's email. Now, Kevin emailed me, and he's a long-term listener of the podcast, and he listens to it every day, he says, and he heard me talking about Ford, how Ford weren't in a rush to get into the EV game. It worries me, because I was a real fan in the 90s of fast Fords and Fords rallying and stuff like that, posters on my bedroom wall when I was growing up, and I would like them to be moving forward with EVs quicker than they are. I worry that Ford are falling behind. Well, Kevin said that this past summer, he was talking to a small group of people gathered around a Model 3, and he was talking to a man who works for a certain company, and I won't give any more details in case he wasn't meant to be saying these things, and Kevin's not meant to be emailing me. Anyway, the chap he was talking to was telling him that he works on a contract that actually builds parts for a forthcoming Ford electric pickup truck. Now, obviously, this chap could have been lying. Obviously, he could have been embellishing to make it a good story. It could have just been a concept, but it's kind of interesting. I do give companies like Ford more of a hard time on this podcast because I'd like them to be pedaling a little bit quicker. And I should say, in their defence, and sometimes what I don't always say is we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And so there could be a lot of what, and I read that email out simply to criticise myself and to check myself and to say that actually there could be the Paris Motor Show in a couple of weeks' time, and boom, a big announcement. And actually been working on it for months and years, and I would look foolish. So I just thought I'd throw that in. Interesting stuff. Not a confirmed story, but always interesting to hear from our listeners. The email address is hello@evnewsdaily.com. And hello to our latest friend on Patreon. Thank you so much to Kent. Now, Kent Canstad is our latest Patreon supporter. And thank you very much for supporting this podcast at the $5 a month level. I know that is just a fancy coffee every month. You might even buy one on your way to work every day and think nothing of it. And there goes $25 a week just on your daily commute. Well, $5 would help keep this podcast going and grow it and reach more people and, of course, increase the popularity of electric cars. A heartfelt thank you to all 65 patrons of this show who help us keep going. One of those patrons is myev.com. They set the question of the week this week. You can answer the question. I'd love to hear from you on email, on the YouTube comments, on Facebook comments. And the question of the week is this: how much do you spend on charging your EV at home? And has it made a large difference to your household bills? I've loved the comments I've had so far. Keep them coming. I'll read them out this weekend. All previous 224 episodes of the podcast on all the usual places, and the blog at evnewsdaily.com. If you can do one thing for me, it's not the Patreon thing. You can check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/evnewsdaily if you want to. That's not anything that you have to do. If you could do one thing for me, it would be to leave a rate and review on any of those kind of podcast sites like iTunes, because it really, really helps. You can check out the socials anytime. Search EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you tomorrow.